The sun had barely crawled above the jagged edges of the Sierra Nevada mountains when the first shot rang out across Grass Valley, California, changing Zachary Alden's life forever, and not for the better. The year was 1876, and in a town built on gold rush dreams and frontier justice, a man's reputation was often worth more than the gold that had brought settlers flooding to California in the first place. Rose Allerton watched in horror from the boardwalk outside her father's mercantile as Zachary, the man she'd secretly been courting against her father's wishes, was dragged through the muddy street by Sheriff Wilson and his deputy. His face was bloodied, his usually immaculate black hat trampled in the dirt behind them. "He killed Edgar Thornton," someone shouted, and the gathering crowd gasped collectively. Rose felt her knees weaken beneath her. Edgar Thornton was one of the most respected men in Grass Valley, a wealthy mine owner who employed half the men in town, including Rose's father. His body had been found that morning behind the Golden Nugget Saloon, a bullet through his heart and his money purse missing. "I didn't do it!" Zachary shouted, his voice carrying over the murmuring crowd. His eyes, wild with panic, found Rose's. "Rose, I was with you last night. Tell them." But Rose stood frozen, her throat tight with fear. Admitting she'd been with Zachary at the creek until well after dark would ruin her reputation and incur her father's wrath. More importantly, they hadn't been together the entire night. Zachary had walked her home by 10 o'clock, leaving plenty of time for him to have committed the murder. "Rose!" Zachary called again, desperation in his voice, as the sheriff dragged him toward the jailhouse. Her father appeared beside her, his large hand gripping her elbow tightly. "Inside, Rose, now." "But father, now." His voice brooked no argument, and with one last glance at Zachary's retreating form, Rose allowed herself to be led back into the store. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding outside. The mercantile smelled of coffee beans, leather, and the faint mustiness of fabric bolts, scents that usually brought Rose comfort, but now seemed to suffocate her. "You stay away from that window, you hear me?" her father said, guiding her firmly behind the counter. At 48, James Allerton was still a formidable figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick brown beard streaked with gray. "That Alden boy is trouble. Always has been." "He's not a boy, father. He's 26 years old, and one of the most respected ranchers in the county." Rose's voice was quiet but steady. At 22, she had learned when to stand her ground with her father, though she chose her battles carefully. "Respected?" Her father's laugh was harsh. His father was a drunk who gambled away most of their land before dying in a ditch, and now the son is a murderer. "I was right to forbid you from seeing him." Rose turned away, unwilling to let her father see the tears gathering in her eyes. "We don't know that he killed Mr. Thornton." Sheriff seemed pretty certain. "They found Thornton's gold watch in his saddlebag." Her father began rearranging items on a shelf with unnecessary force. "I've seen the way he looks at you when he comes in for supplies. Been meaning to have a word with him about that." Rose bit her lip. If only her father knew that for the past 6 months, she and Zachary had been meeting in secret at church socials, by the creek at sunset, once even at the spring dance when her father had been too busy playing cards with the other merchants to notice. Zachary wasn't like the other men in Grass Valley. He was gentle and thoughtful, with dreams bigger than the small mining town. He'd been slowly building up his ranch, determined to prove that a man could make something of himself through honest work despite his father's notorious reputation. "I'm heading to the jailhouse," her father announced, grabbing his hat from the hook by the door. "The sheriff will need statements from everyone who saw Thornton last night. You mind the store, and remember what I said, stay away from that window." The moment her father left, Rose rushed to the window, pushing aside the calico curtain just enough to see the crowd still gathered outside the jailhouse across the street. Her heart hammered painfully in her chest. She knew Zachary, he wasn't a killer, but the evidence seemed damning, and in a town like Grass Valley, rumors spread faster than wildfire in August. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of whispers and sidelong glances. Rose felt the weight of the town's judgment every time she stepped outside the mercantile or attended Sunday service. No one knew of her relationship with Zachary, but her defense of his character had raised eyebrows. "Why are you so certain of his innocence?" Martha Benson, the banker's wife, had asked her after church, her tone more accusatory than curious. "I believe a man is innocent until proven guilty," Rose had replied, lifting her chin slightly. Isn't that what our justice system is founded upon? The trial was set for early June, giving the circuit judge time to arrive from Sacramento. In the meantime, Rose did everything she could to help Zachary from a distance. She convinced her father to allow her to bring food to the prisoners. It's Christian charity, Father, and slipped notes to Zachary, hidden in the napkins covering the bread. His responses, scribbled on scraps of paper and tucked into the returned basket, broke her heart. I didn't kill him, Rose. I swear on my mother's grave. After I left you that night, I went straight home. Thornton's watch must have been planted in my saddlebag while my horse was tied outside the general store that morning. Someone's framing me. Another note read, they won't let my ranch hand Raphael testify that I was home all night. They say he's just a Mexican and would lie for me. Please, Rose, try to find someone who saw Thornton after I walked you home. It's my only hope. Rose spent her evenings discreetly questioning the townsfolk about the night of the murder. She learned that Thornton had been playing poker at the Golden Nugget until nearly midnight, which matched the time of death the doctor had estimated. He'd been winning heavily, which gave anyone at the table a motive. But without concrete evidence pointing to another suspect, Zachary remained the prime and only candidate. The night before the trial, Rose sat at her bedroom window, watching the stars emerge one by one above the pine-covered mountains. The air was warm for early June, carrying the scent of wildflowers and promise. Tomorrow would determine Zachary's fate. The circuit judge, Hiram Blackwell, had arrived that afternoon, and rumor had it he was a harsh man who believed firmly in setting examples. A soft tap at her window startled her. Rose peered into the darkness, her heart skipping when she recognized the face looking back at her. Raphael, she whispered, quickly unlatching the window. What are you doing here? Rafael Mendoza, Zachary's loyal ranch hand, glanced nervously over his shoulder. Miss Rose, I had to come. There's something you need to know. Come in quickly. Rose helped the wiry man climb through her window, praying her father wouldn't choose this moment to check on her. Raphael removed his hat, twisting it nervously in his hands. Mr. Zachary, he is innocent. I know this because I saw something the night Mr. Thornton died. Rose's heart raced. What did you see? I was in town late, visiting my cousin who works at the livery. When I was walking back to the ranch, I saw Mr. Thornton leaving the saloon with another man. They were arguing. Who was the man? Rose leaned forward eagerly. Raphael shook his head. It was dark, and I did not see his face clearly, but he was big, with wide shoulders, and he walked with a limp. Rose's mind raced, cataloging the men in town who matched that description. Douglas Fletcher, she whispered. Fletcher was a rival mine owner who had been trying to buy out Thornton's claim for months. Maybe, Raphael agreed. But there's more. After Mr. Zachary was arrested, this man he came to the ranch. He was looking for something in Mr. Zachary's house. When he saw me, he threatened me with a knife, told me if I said anything about what I saw that night, he would make sure I was sent back to Mexico. Or worse. That's why you haven't gone to the sheriff, Rose realized. Raphael nodded, shame evident in his downcast eyes. I am a coward, Miss Rose. I have a family who depends on me. Rose took his rough hands in hers. You're not a coward, Raphael. You're here now, and that's what matters. We need to go to the sheriff immediately. The sheriff will not believe me over a white man, especially not a Mexican who works for the accused. Rose knew he was right. The law in Grass Valley, as in most frontier towns, wasn't always applied equally. Then we'll find evidence, something that proves Fletcher was involved. A plan began to form in her mind, dangerous and risky. But Zachary's life was at stake. Raphael, do you know where Fletcher lives? In the big house on Cedar Ridge, just outside town. Can you get me there tonight? Raphael's eyes widened. Miss Rose, that is too dangerous. More dangerous than letting an innocent man hang? Rose was already moving to her wardrobe, pulling out a dark skirt and shawl. Zachary would do the same for me. After a moment's hesitation, Raphael nodded. I will take you. But if there is trouble, I'll take full responsibility, Rose promised, quickly changing behind her dressing screen. Wait for me by the big oak behind the store. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. The ride to Cedar Ridge took nearly an hour, with Raphael leading the way through back trails to avoid being seen. Fletcher's house loomed ahead, a 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and glass windows that glittered in the moonlight, ostentatious by Grass Valley standards. There's a light on in the study, Raphael whispered, pointing to a window on the ground floor. Fletcher often works late. Rose dismounted, tying her horse to a low branch well out of sight of the house. Stay here with the horses. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, go for help. Miss Rose, please reconsider. But Rose was already creeping toward the house, keeping to the shadows cast by the towering pines. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give her away. She'd never done anything so reckless in her life. Yet she felt strangely calm. For Zachary, she would risk everything. The study window was partially open, allowing the warm night air to circulate. Rose crouched beneath it, listening. Inside, she could hear the scratch of a pen on paper and the occasional clink of glass. Fletcher enjoying a late-night whiskey, perhaps. A sudden bark from inside the house made Rose jump. A dog, she hadn't considered that. The barking grew louder, accompanied by the sound of approaching footsteps. "What is it, boy? Something out there?" Fletcher's voice was low and gravelly. Rose pressed herself against the wall, barely breathing. The dog continued to bark, and she heard the creak of the front door opening. Panicking, she looked for somewhere to hide, but the manicured lawn offered little cover. "Hello! Who's out there?" Fletcher called, and now Rose could see his silhouette on the porch, a rifle in his hands. The dog, a large hound, bounded off the porch, heading straight for her hiding spot. In that desperate moment, Rose made a decision. Instead of running, she stepped out into the moonlight. "Mr. Fletcher, I apologize for the intrusion. I'm Rose Allerton." Fletcher lowered his rifle slightly, clearly surprised. The dog reached her, sniffing at her skirts curiously. "James Allerton's daughter? What in God's name are you doing at my house at this hour?" Rose had prepared a story on the ride over. "I'm terribly sorry, but my horse threw a shoe about a mile back. I saw your lights and hoped I might trouble you for assistance." Fletcher studied her for a long moment, suspicion evident in his narrowed eyes. "It's mighty strange for a young lady to be riding alone at night. I was visiting a sick friend in North San Juan," Rose improvised, naming the neighboring town. "I stayed later than I intended." After another moment's hesitation, Fletcher nodded, seemingly accepting her story. "Come inside. I'll send my stable hand to fetch your horse." "Oh, that won't be necessary. If I could just borrow a lantern and perhaps your stable hand could help me get home." "Nonsense. It's not safe for you to be out alone, especially with a murderer's trial tomorrow. The whole town's on edge." Rose had no choice but to follow Fletcher into the house, her mind racing to adjust her plan. The interior was as impressive as the exterior: polished wooden floors, expensive furniture imported from San Francisco, and genuine oil paintings on the walls. Fletcher led her to the study, gesturing for her to take a seat in a leather chair across from his desk. "Drink?" he offered, already pouring himself another whiskey. "No, thank you." Rose glanced around the room, looking for anything that might connect Fletcher to Thornton's murder. The desk was cluttered with papers, mining contracts, and correspondence, from what she could see upside down. "I must say, Miss Allerton, your story seems rather implausible," Fletcher said, sitting down and fixing her with a penetrating stare. "There are no residences in the direction you came from, only my mining operations and, further on, the Alden ranch." Rose's mouth went dry. "As I said, I was coming from North San Juan." "North San Juan is east of here. You approached from the south." Fletcher's voice hardened. "You're a friend of Alden's, aren't you? That's why you're here." "I don't know what you mean," Rose said, but her voice trembled. Fletcher leaned forward, his expression darkening. "Everyone knows you've been visiting him in jail, bringing food, passing notes. You think he's innocent? And you know he isn't." The words slipped out before Rose could stop them. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Fletcher's face. "Clever girl, but not clever enough to come here alone." He stood, moving around the desk toward her. "What exactly were you hoping to find?" Rose stood as well, backing away. "Mr. Fletcher, I should go. My father will be worried." "Your father thinks you're tucked safely in bed." Fletcher reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small object that glinted in the lamplight, a gold pocket watch. Rose gasped. The watch was nearly identical to the one found in Zachary's saddlebag, the one that had belonged to Edgar Thornton. Fletcher noticed her reaction. "Beautiful craftsmanship, isn't it? Custom made in Sacramento. Edgar had one just like it. We ordered them together to celebrate our first successful mining venture." His smile turned cruel. "It was simple enough to plant Edgar's watch in Alden's saddlebag while he was busy mooning over you in your father's store. Why? Rose whispered, her back now against the bookshelf. Why frame Zachary? Because he refused to sell me his water rights, Fletcher said simply. His ranch controls the creek that feeds into my newest mine. I offered him a fair price, but he declined. Said his father might have sold off their land piece by piece, but he wouldn't make the same mistake. Fletcher's face hardened. No one says no to me, not in this town. And Thornton? Why kill him? Edgar discovered some creative accounting in our joint ventures. He was threatening to expose me. I couldn't allow that. Fletcher was now close enough that Rose could smell the whiskey on his breath. It's nothing personal, Miss Allerton. Just business. Rose's mind raced. She needed to get out of the house and bring this confession to the sheriff, but Fletcher was blocking her path to the door. They'll hang an innocent man, she said, trying to appeal to whatever conscience he might have. Fletcher shrugged. One less obstacle. Once Alden's gone, his property will go up for auction. I'll acquire it legally, and no one will be the wiser. A sound from outside the snap of a twig made Fletcher turn his head. In that moment, Rose grabbed the heavy brass lamp from the desk and swung it with all her might. It connected with Fletcher's temple, and he crumpled to the floor with a groan. Shaking, Rose stared at the unconscious man for a moment before springing into action. She grabbed the pocket watch from where it had fallen and began rifling through the papers on his desk. At the bottom of a stack, she found what she was looking for, a deed of sale for Zachary's property, already drawn up and waiting only for a signature. The front door burst open, and Rose whirled around, ready to defend herself again, but it was Raphael. "Miss Rose, are you hurt?" His eyes widened at the sight of Fletcher on the floor. "I'm fine. Help me tie him up. We're taking him to the sheriff." "You struck him?" Raphael seemed both impressed and alarmed. He confessed to killing Thornton and framing Zachary. Rose quickly explained what she had learned, while using Fletcher's own neckties to bind his hands and feet. "We need to hurry. The trial starts at 9 tomorrow morning." Getting an unconscious man onto a horse proved challenging, but with Raphael's help, they managed to sling Fletcher face down across his own mount. They rode hard for Grass Valley, the journey back seeming twice as long with their unwilling companion. Dawn was breaking as they thundered into town, heading straight for the sheriff's office. The commotion drew curious onlookers, including Sheriff Wilson himself, who emerged from the jailhouse buttoning his vest. "What in tarnation!" he exclaimed as Rose and Raphael rode up, Fletcher beginning to stir and mumble on the horse between them. "Sheriff Wilson, I have evidence that Douglas Fletcher murdered Edgar Thornton and framed Zachary Alden," Rose announced, dismounting quickly and holding out the pocket watch and papers. "Fletcher confessed everything to me tonight." The sheriff's skeptical expression didn't change. "Miss Allerton, you expect me to believe that you, a shopkeeper's daughter, somehow extracted a confession from one of the most powerful men in the county?" "He's wearing a knife in his boot that matches the wounds on Thornton's body," Raphael interjected. "And the watch, it's a twin to the one found in Mr. Zachary's saddlebag. Fletcher said they ordered them together." Sheriff Wilson frowned, clearly torn between his duty and the influence Fletcher wielded in Grass Valley. "That's circumstantial at best." By now, a small crowd had gathered, including Judge Blackwell, who had stepped out of the hotel across the street to see what the commotion was about. "What's going on here, Sheriff?" the judge called, making his way over. Rose turned to the judge, desperation in her voice. "Your Honor, an innocent man is scheduled to be tried today for a murder he didn't commit. I have evidence that Douglas Fletcher is the real killer." Judge Blackwell, a lean man with shrewd eyes and a reputation for fairness despite his strictness, studied the scene before him. "Serious accusations, young lady. What evidence do you have?" Rose presented the watch and documents, explaining Fletcher's confession and motive. As she spoke, Fletcher fully regained consciousness, thrashing against his bonds and hurling threats. "She's lying. This is kidnapping. I'll see you all hanged for this." "Mr. Fletcher," Judge Blackwell said calmly, "I suggest you remain silent until we sort this out. Sheriff, I believe this warrants a postponement of today's trial and a full investigation into these new allegations." Sheriff Wilson nodded reluctantly. "Yes, Your Honor." "Get that Mexican off my property deed," Fletcher shouted, inadvertently confirming part of Rose's story. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Indeed, a full investigation. Sheriff, take Mr. Fletcher into custody. We'll hold a hearing this afternoon once I've had a chance to review all the evidence." Rose felt dizzy with relief. "And Zachary?" Will you release him? Not yet, the judge said. But if what you say proves true, he'll be a free man by sundown. The next few hours were a whirlwind. Rose was questioned extensively by the sheriff and judge, retelling her story multiple times. Raphael's testimony about seeing Fletcher and Thornton arguing was finally taken seriously. Most damning of all was the knife found in Fletcher's boot. When compared to Thornton's wounds, it was a perfect match. By mid-afternoon, word had spread throughout Grass Valley about the dramatic turn of events. Rose's father had been initially furious to discover she had been out all night, but his anger had quickly turned to pride as the truth emerged. "You could have been killed," he scolded her, though there was more fear than anger in his voice now. "But I suppose I underestimated your judgment about a great many things." Rose knew he was referring to Zachary. "Does that mean you no longer object to him?" Her father sighed heavily. "Let's just say I'm willing to get to know the young man properly before passing judgment." That was as close to a blessing as she was likely to get, and Rose hugged him gratefully. At 4 o'clock, Judge Blackwell called a special session of court. The town hall was packed, with people standing along the walls and even peering through the windows from outside. Rose sat in the front row, her father beside her, as the judge delivered his findings. "Based on the evidence presented in Mr. Fletcher's own damning statements, I find that there is sufficient cause to dismiss all charges against Zachary Alden." A cheer went up from many in the crowd. "Furthermore, I am remanding Douglas Fletcher to custody to stand trial for the murder of Edgar Thornton and the attempted framing of an innocent man." Fletcher, now properly shackled, was led away cursing, but Rose hardly noticed her eyes were fixed on the side door, where Zachary was being brought in, no longer in shackles. His face was thinner than she remembered, with several days' growth of beard, but his eyes found hers immediately. He crossed the room in long strides, ignoring the congratulations and backslaps from the crowd, stopping only when he reached Rose. "You saved my life," he said simply, his voice rough with emotion. Rose smiled through her tears. "I knew you were innocent, but to risk your life, your reputation. Some things are worth risking everything for," she replied softly. Her father cleared his throat beside them. "Mr. Alden, I believe I owe you an apology, and perhaps you would join us for dinner this evening. We have much to discuss." Zachary looked surprised, but quickly recovered. "I would be honored, sir." The next 2 weeks were a period of healing and reconciliation for Grass Valley. Fletcher's trial was swift, the evidence against him overwhelming. He was sentenced to hang, though the execution would take place in Sacramento, not Grass Valley. The truth about his business dealings with Thornton also came to light, revealing that he had been siphoning profits from their shared mines for years. For Zachary, the ordeal had been a brutal reminder of how quickly a man's reputation could be destroyed. Despite his name being cleared, some in town still viewed him with suspicion. The whispers gradually faded as life returned to normal, but the experience had changed him. "I'm thinking of selling the ranch," he told Rose one evening, as they walked along the creek where they had once met in secret. Now, with her father's grudging approval, they could court openly. "Too many memories here, both my father's and now mine." Rose felt a pang of disappointment. "Where would you go?" "I was thinking Oregon. They say the Willamette Valley is good ranching country, and a man can start fresh there." Rose stopped walking, her hand slipping from his arm. "Oregon is very far away." Zachary turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "It doesn't have to be." "What do you mean?" "Come with me, Rose, as my wife." He dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. "I love you. I have since the moment you stood up to Wilson Baker for trying to cheat Raphael at your father's store. You're brave and kind and smarter than anyone I know. I don't want to start a new life without you." Rose felt tears welling in her eyes. "Zachary Alden, are you proposing to me?" "I am." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band. "It was my mother's. I know it's not much." "It's perfect," Rose whispered, extending her hand so he could slip the ring onto her finger. "And yes, I will marry you and go to Oregon, or anywhere else, as long as we're together." Zachary stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion of a man who had nearly lost everything and now found himself with a future full of promise. The news of their engagement was met with mixed reactions. Rose's father, true to his word, had warmed to Zachary over the past weeks, but was dismayed at the thought of his only child moving so far away. Oregon, That's Indian country still in some parts, he protested over dinner that evening. Not where we're going, Zachary assured him. The Willamette Valley is well settled now. There are proper towns, schools. Rose will be safe, I promise you. And what will you do with your ranch here? I've had an offer from the Jenkins brothers. They've been wanting to expand their operation for years. James Allerton nodded slowly, processing this. And my store? Rose has been my right hand since her mother passed. Rose reached across the table to touch her father's hand. You could come with us, Father. Start a new mercantile in Oregon. There must be settlers there in need of supplies. The suggestion hung in the air, neither accepted nor rejected, but it planted a seed that would grow over the coming weeks. With the sale of his ranch proceeding quickly, Zachary and Rose set their wedding date for August 15th, giving them time to organize their affairs before departing for Oregon, before the winter weather made travel difficult. The entire town was invited to the ceremony, which would be held in the small white church on Pine Street. As the day approached, Rose was surprised to receive a letter from Sacramento, from Judge Blackwell, who had returned to his regular circuit after Fletcher's trial. Dear Miss Allerton, it read, I have been following with interest the developments in Grass Valley since the Fletcher case. Word has reached me of your upcoming nuptials to Mr. Alden, and I wish to extend my personal congratulations. Your courage and determination in seeking justice impressed me greatly, and I have no doubt you will make an admirable partner in all of Mr. Alden's future endeavors. As a token of my esteem, please accept the enclosed gift for your new home. The gift was a handsome grandfather clock, delivered 2 days later by Stagecoach, a practical yet elegant reminder of the passage of time and the value of every moment. The wedding day dawned clear and warm, with just enough of a breeze to stir the bunting and ribbons that decorated the church. Rose wore a gown of ivory silk that her father had specially ordered from San Francisco, his wedding gift to her, along with the news that he had decided to sell the mercantile and join them in Oregon. I'm too old to start again alone, he had told her when he announced his decision, and I find I'm not ready to say goodbye to my only child just yet. The church was filled to capacity, with even those who had once whispered against Zachary now present to wish the couple well. Raphael served as best man, beaming with pride in his new suit, also a gift from Zachary to thank him for his loyalty. After the ceremony, the celebration spilled into the town square, where tables had been set up, laden with food, contributed by nearly every household in Grass Valley. There was dancing and laughter long into the evening, the earlier tensions of the summer forgotten in the joy of the moment. As the sun began to set, painting the mountains gold and pink, Zachary pulled Rose aside from the festivities. "Happy, Mrs. Alden?" he asked, his arms encircling her waist. "Completely," she replied, tipping her face up for his kiss. "Though I still can't quite believe we leave for Oregon in 2 weeks. Having second thoughts? Not about marrying you." Rose rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "But I've lived in Grass Valley my whole life. It's strange to think of calling somewhere else home." "Home isn't a place," Zachary said softly, stroking her hair. "It's where the people you love are. You taught me that." 2 weeks later, Rose stood on the platform of the Grass Valley train station, saying her final goodbyes to friends and neighbors. The Pacific Railroad would take them to Sacramento, where they would connect with a steamer heading north to Portland, Oregon. From there, they would travel by stagecoach to the land Zachary had purchased sight unseen in the Willamette Valley. Her father had gone ahead the day before with most of their luggage and supplies, eager to secure accommodations in Sacramento before their arrival. The Jenkins brothers were there too, having completed the purchase of Zachary's ranch the previous week. "You write to us as soon as you're settled," Martha Benson instructed, hugging Rose tightly. "And don't forget to send for some of my raspberry jam next summer. I doubt those Oregonians know how to make proper preserves." Rose laughed, wiping away tears. "I promise." One by one, she embraced the women who had been part of her life since childhood, her Sunday school teacher, the midwife who had delivered her, the wives of miners and merchants who had watched her grow from a shy girl to the woman who had defied convention to save an innocent man. The station master appeared, checking his pocket watch. "Train's coming. 5 minutes." Rose turned to look down the track, where a plume of smoke was visible in the distance. Soon, they would be on their way to their new life. She felt a strange mixture of excitement and trepidation. Then she realized someone was missing. "Where's Zachary?" she asked, scanning the platform. He had been there just moments ago, speaking with the sheriff about some last-minute paperwork regarding Fletcher's case. Sheriff Wilson approached her, his expression grave. "Mrs. Alden, I'm afraid I have some troubling news." Rose's heart seemed to stop. "What is it? Is Zachary hurt?" "No, madam, he's fine, but I've just received a telegram from Sacramento." He handed her the yellow paper. "Fletcher escaped during transfer to the state prison yesterday. He was last seen heading north." Rose read the telegram with growing horror. "North? Toward Oregon?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "It seems likely he's planning to intercept you and Mr. Alden on your journey. I've sent deputies to alert the authorities along the route, but he could be anywhere," Rose finished for him. "Where is my husband? He needs to know this immediately." "That's just it, madam. He already knows. After I showed him the telegram, he said he had to take care of something urgent before you left. He asked me to tell you he'd be right back, but that was nearly 20 minutes ago." The train's whistle sounded, closer now. Rose felt panic rising in her chest. "We can't leave without him." "The train won't wait, Mrs. Alden. It's on a schedule." Rose made a split-second decision. "Then it will have to leave without us. I need to find my husband." She lifted her skirts and ran from the platform, ignoring the calls of concern from her friends. Zachary wouldn't just disappear, not without telling her where he was going. Something was wrong. She rushed toward the sheriff's office, thinking perhaps Zachary had gone to gather more information about Fletcher's escape. The office was empty except for the deputy on duty. "Mrs. Alden, aren't you supposed to be on the train?" "Have you seen my husband?" Rose asked breathlessly. "Not since he left with the sheriff earlier." The deputy looked confused. "Is something wrong?" Without answering, Rose turned and hurried back toward the center of town. Where would Zachary go? The bank was closed on Sundays. The church? No, the pastor was at the station to see them off. Then it hit her: the stables. If Zachary thought Fletcher might be coming for them, he might have decided they should take horses instead of the train, allowing them to travel cross-country and avoid the main roads. Rose ran to Johnson's livery at the edge of town. The stable yard was quiet in the Sunday afternoon lull, with most of the horses out in the paddock enjoying the sunshine. But as she approached, she heard voices from inside the barn, angry raised voices. "Should have let you hang, Alden. Would have saved me the trouble of killing you myself." Fletcher? Rose froze, her blood running cold. How had he gotten to Grass Valley so quickly? He must have ridden day and night. "You won't get away with this, Fletcher." Zachary's voice was calm, controlled. "The whole town knows what you did. By the time they find your bodies, I'll be halfway to Mexico." Bodies, plural. Fletcher must know she was with Zachary. Rose glanced around frantically for a weapon, spotting a pitchfork leaning against the barn wall. She grabbed it, then crept toward the partially open barn door, trying to see inside without being seen. Zachary stood with his back to a stall, his hands raised slightly. Fletcher faced him, a revolver pointed steadily at Zachary's chest. Neither man had noticed Rose. "You took everything from me," Fletcher snarled. "My reputation, my business, my freedom." "You did that to yourself when you murdered Thornton," Zachary replied evenly. "And when you tried to frame me. That little wife of yours is too clever for her own good." Fletcher's voice was venomous. "She should have minded her own business. Now she'll pay for it too." Rose saw Zachary's eyes flicker momentarily with fear, the first sign that his composure was cracking. "Rose has nothing to do with this. She's already on the train." "Liar. I watched the station. She's looking for you." Fletcher laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in the empty barn. "In fact, I'm counting on it. When she finds you, I'll be waiting." Rose realized she had only moments to act. Fletcher's back was to her, his attention focused entirely on Zachary. She tightened her grip on the pitchfork and pushed the door open wider, wincing at the creak of the hinges. Fletcher started to turn at the sound, but Rose was already moving. With all her strength, she drove the pitchfork forward, aiming for his arm. The tines caught his sleeve, missing flesh, but knocking his aim off just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wide, splintering wood above Zachary's head. In that moment of distraction, Zachary lunged forward, tackling Fletcher to the ground. The gun skittered across the dirt floor, and Rose dove for it, her hands closing around the cold metal. "Rose, get back!" Zachary shouted, struggling with Fletcher, who, despite being older, was powerfully built. Rose held the gun with shaking hands, trying to aim at Fletcher without risking hitting Zachary. The two men rolled across the floor, trading blows until Fletcher managed to get on top, his hands closing around Zachary's throat. "Stop!" Rose shouted, cocking the hammer of the revolver. "Let him go, or I swear I'll shoot!" Fletcher glanced up at her, his face twisted with hate. "You don't have the guts, girl. Try me." Rose's voice was steady now, her aim unwavering. "I've already helped send you to prison once. I won't hesitate to put you in the ground if you harm my husband." Something in her expression must have convinced Fletcher she meant it, because his grip on Zachary's throat loosened slightly. It was enough for Zachary to break free, driving his knee up into Fletcher's stomach and rolling away. Rose kept the gun trained on Fletcher as Zachary staggered to his feet, gasping for air. "The sheriff," Zachary rasped, rubbing his throat. "Go get the sheriff." But Rose couldn't take her eyes off Fletcher, who was now slowly rising to his knees, watching them both with calculating eyes. "I'm not leaving you alone with him." From outside, they heard the train whistle a long, mournful sound, signaling its departure from the station, their train to Sacramento, leaving without them. "Looks like you'll be staying in Grass Valley after all," Fletcher sneered, "at least until I finish what I came for." Before either of them could respond, the barn door burst open again, this time revealing Sheriff Wilson and 2 deputies, guns drawn. "Don't move, Fletcher," the sheriff ordered. "Hands where I can see them." Fletcher's shoulders slumped in defeat as the deputies rushed forward to secure him. Rose lowered the revolver, her arm aching from the tension of holding it steady for so long. "Are you both all right?" Sheriff Wilson asked, moving to stand beside them as his deputies hauled Fletcher to his feet. Zachary nodded, putting an arm around Rose's waist. "Thanks to my wife." "How did you know to come here?" Rose asked the sheriff, leaning into Zachary's embrace, suddenly exhausted. "Raphael. He was helping load the last of your trunks onto the train when he spotted a horse he recognized tied behind Johnson's feed store, said it was one of Fletcher's prize Morgans. When I realized both you and Mr. Alden were missing from the station, I put 2 and 2 together." Fletcher was led away cursing and threatening, even as the deputies secured him with double shackles this time. "This isn't over," he shouted over his shoulder. "Yes, it is," Sheriff Wilson said firmly. "He'll be under guard every minute until he reaches San Quentin. And this time, he won't be coming back." Left alone in the stable, Rose finally let the tears come, burying her face in Zachary's shirt. "I thought I'd lost you," she sobbed. "When the sheriff told me about Fletcher escaping, and then you were gone." "I'm sorry," Zachary murmured into her hair, his arms tightening around her. "When Wilson showed me the telegram, I thought I could protect you by finding Fletcher before he found us. I should have known you'd come looking for me." "Of course I came looking for you. We're partners now, remember?" Rose lifted her tear-stained face to his. "No more facing dangers alone. We do it together, or not at all." Zachary smiled, touching her cheek tenderly. "Together it is. Though I'm hoping our life in Oregon involves considerably less mortal peril." "The train," Rose suddenly remembered. "We've missed it." "There'll be another one tomorrow," Zachary assured her. "I think after today's excitement, we could both use a good night's rest before starting our journey." They walked back through town, hand in hand, aware of the curious stares from those who had expected them to be halfway to Sacramento by now. News of Fletcher's capture had already begun to spread, and several people stopped them to express relief that they were safe. By the time they reached Rose's father's house, now sold but still theirs, for one more night, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the quiet streets of Grass Valley. "I need to send a telegram to your father," Zachary said, as they stepped onto the porch. "He'll be worried when we don't arrive on tomorrow's steamer." "We'll go together in the morning," Rose decided, unlocking the door. "Right now, I just want to be here with you, safe." That night, as they lay in the small bedroom that had been Rose's since childhood, Zachary held her close, his breath warm against her neck. "When I was in that jail cell, I thought of you every day," he whispered. "I imagined the life we might have had if things had gone differently. I never dared to hope we'd actually get that chance." Rose turned in his arms to face him. "We have that chance now, and Fletcher can never take it from us again." The next morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect day for new beginnings. After sending the telegram to Rose's father, explaining their delay, they repacked the few belongings they had kept with them and prepared once more to leave Grass Valley. This time, as they stood on the platform waiting for the train, there was no crowd of well-wishers, just the station master and Raphael, who had insisted on staying another day to see them safely on their way. "You be careful, Mr. Zachary, Miss Rose," Raphael said, clasping their hands in turn. "I will join you in Oregon next month, once I have settled my family's affairs here." "We'll be waiting," Zachary promised. "The land I bought has enough acres for you to have your own homestead nearby, just as we discussed." The train appeared in the distance, a plume of smoke against the blue sky. Rose took a deep breath, gazing one last time at the town that had been her whole world until now. The church spire, the storefronts along Main Street, the mountains rising beyond. So much had happened here, both wonderful and terrible. But the future beckoned, full of promise. As the train pulled into the station, with a screech of brakes and a blast of steam, Rose felt the last of her apprehension melt away. She was ready for whatever lay ahead, as long as Zachary was by her side. They boarded the train, finding seats by the window. As the whistle blew and the train lurched forward, beginning its journey northward, Zachary took her hand. "No regrets?" he asked softly. Rose smiled, squeezing his hand. "None at all." The rhythmic click of the wheels on the track soon lulled Rose into a peaceful doze, her head resting on Zachary's shoulder. She dreamed of green valleys and clear streams, of a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, of children running through fields of wildflowers, their future waiting to unfold. When she awoke several hours later, they were approaching Sacramento. The city sprawled along the river, larger and busier than Grass Valley, with steamboats docked along the waterfront and carriages crowding the streets. "Your father should be meeting us at the station," Zachary said as they gathered their belongings. "From there, we'll get rooms for the night and catch the steamer to Portland tomorrow morning." But when they disembarked at the Sacramento station, James Allerton was nowhere to be seen. Rose felt a flicker of worry. Her father was unfailingly punctual. "Perhaps he's been delayed," Zachary suggested, though he looked concerned as well. "Let's wait a bit." They sat on a bench near the ticket office, watching as the other passengers were greeted by family or dispersed into the city. Half an hour passed, then an hour. Still no sign of James. "Something's wrong," Rose said finally, standing. "We should check the hotel where he was planning to stay." They hired a hack to take them to the Golden Eagle Hotel, one of the finest in Sacramento, and where James had said he would secure rooms for their overnight stay. The clerk at the front desk checked his registry. "Yes, Mr. Allerton checked in yesterday afternoon," he confirmed. "He went out early this evening and hasn't returned." Rose and Zachary exchanged worried glances. "Did he say where he was going?" Zachary asked. The clerk shook his head. "No, sir, but he did receive a message just before he left." Seemed quite agitated about it. "A message? From whom?" "I couldn't say, sir. It was delivered by a boy from the telegraph office." Zachary thanked the clerk and led Rose to a quiet corner of the lobby. "I don't like this," he said in a low voice. "After everything that's happened with Fletcher, I'm not taking any chances. Let's go to the telegraph office and see if they can tell us what that message said." The Sacramento telegraph office was closing for the day when they arrived, but the manager, seeing their distress, agreed to help. He searched through the carbon copies of messages sent that day. "Allerton, Allerton," he muttered, flipping through the pages. "Ah, here it is. Message sent to James Allerton at the Golden Eagle Hotel at 4:15 p.m. He adjusted his spectacles and read aloud. "Urgent stop. Meet me at Riverboat Docks. Slip 7. 5 p.m. Stop matter. Concerns. Rose and Zachary. Stop come alone." "Stop." "Who sent it?" Rose asked, though she already suspected the answer. The manager squinted at the signature line. "No name given, just says a friend." "Fletcher," Zachary said grimly. "He must have had an accomplice in Sacramento, someone who sent that telegram after his capture. But why? What could he possibly gain?" Rose's voice trembled with fear for her father. "Revenge," Zachary said simply. "If he couldn't get to us directly, he'd hurt us through someone we love." Rose felt sick. "The riverboat docks. We need to go there immediately." The docks were nearly deserted by the time they arrived. Most of the day's business concluded. A few longshoremen were securing cargo for the night, and a watchman made his rounds with a lantern, but there was no sign of James Allerton. "Slip 7, Zachary muttered, counting down the moorings. "There it is." Slip 7 was empty. The boat that should have been docked there absent. A sign nearby identified it as the berth of the River Queen, a gambling boat that cruised the Sacramento River nightly. "Excuse me," Zachary called to the watchman. "The River Queen, when did it depart?" The watchman consulted his pocket watch. "About 3 hours ago. Won't be back till dawn." "Do you remember seeing an older gentleman waiting here around 5 o'clock? Tall, gray in his beard, well-dressed?" The watchman scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Matter of fact, I did. He was asking about the River Queen, too. Seemed disappointed to hear it wasn't due in port until later. Then a couple of fellas came up to him, said they were crew members and could take him out to where the boat was anchored, waiting for tonight's run." "And he went with them?" Rose asked anxiously. "Far as I could tell. They all got into a skiff together and headed downriver." Zachary's jaw tightened. "These men, can you describe them?" "Rough-looking sorts. One was big, missing part of his left ear. The other was skinnier, had a scar across his cheek." Zachary turned to Rose, his expression grave. "Fletcher's known associates, Carson and Delaney. They must have been waiting in Sacramento in case his plan to intercept us failed." "What do we do now?" Rose whispered, fighting back tears. "If they've taken my father onto the river—" "We go after them." Zachary's voice was firm. "Is there another boat we can hire?" he asked the watchman. "Something fast?" The watchman hesitated. "Mighty dangerous to be on the river at night, mister, especially with the water running high from the spring melt." "My father-in-law's life is at stake," Zachary insisted. "We'll pay whatever it costs." After some negotiation, the watchman agreed to take them to a friend of his who owned a small, swift launch. Within half an hour, they were skimming down the Sacramento River, the wind whipping Rose's hair as she strained to see ahead in the gathering darkness. "The River Queen usually anchors near the delta during the day," their pilot explained, raising his voice over the sound of the engine. "Less scrutiny from the authorities there. They pick up their high-rolling passengers in Sacramento at night, then cruise back down where the gambling laws aren't enforced so strictly." As they rounded a bend in the river, they saw it the River Queen, its 3 decks ablaze with lights that reflected in the dark water below. Music drifted across the water, along with the sounds of laughter and revelry. "That's it," the pilot confirmed. "Want me to take you alongside?" Zachary nodded, his hand resting reassuringly on Rose's. "As quietly as possible." They approached from the starboard side, away from the main boarding area, where passengers were still arriving by smaller boats. Their pilot cut the engine as they drew near, allowing the launch to drift silently toward the riverboat. "Stay here," Zachary told Rose, as the pilot secured their boat to the River Queen's lowest deck. "It's too dangerous." "I'm coming with you," Rose insisted. "He's my father." Zachary knew better than to argue. Together, they climbed aboard, keeping to the shadows as they made their way through the lower deck, which housed the riverboat's machinery and crew quarters. "If Carson and Delaney are holding your father, they won't have him in the public areas," Zachary whispered as they ascended a narrow staircase to the middle deck. "They'll want someplace private." The middle deck was crowded with gamblers moving between tables of faro, poker, and roulette. Rose and Zachary skirted the main salon, trying not to draw attention as they searched for any sign of James or his captors. A burst of raucous laughter drew their attention to a private gaming room off the main floor. Through the partially open door, Rose caught a glimpse of Carson, recognizable by his missing ear, dealing cards to a group of well-dressed men. "There's one of them," she whispered to Zachary. "But where's my father? Let's keep looking. Delaney must be with him somewhere." They continued their search, working their way up to the top deck, where the most exclusive gaming rooms were located. These were guarded by burly men, who checked each patron's credentials before allowing entry. "We won't get past them without an invitation," Zachary murmured, eyeing the guards. Rose glanced around, noticing a service corridor that likely led to the kitchens and storage areas. "This way," she said, pulling Zachary toward it. The corridor was deserted, lit only by a few gas lamps that cast long shadows on the walls. They moved quietly, checking each door they passed. Most were locked or opened onto empty rooms. At the end of the corridor, they came to a heavy door marked "Private." Voices could be heard from within, one pleading, one threatening. "I've told you everything I know." It was James Allerton's voice, strained with fear but defiant. "My daughter and son-in-law should have arrived in Sacramento today. That's all I can tell you." "Not good enough, old man." The second voice was colder, harder. "Fletcher paid us good money to make sure Alden and your daughter suffer. And since they managed to get Fletcher arrested again, we're going to have to be creative about it." Rose gasped, and Zachary put a finger to his lips. warning her to be silent. He motioned for her to step back, then positioned himself beside the door. "On 3, he mouthed, and Rose nodded, understanding his plan. 1, 2, 3. Zachary threw his weight against the door, which burst open with a crack of splintering wood. Inside, James Allerton was tied to a chair, his face bruised but his eyes alert. Delaney stood over him, a knife in his hand. He whirled at the intrusion, the knife now pointed toward Zachary. "Well, look who decided to join the party," Delaney sneered, shifting his stance to keep both Zachary and the door in view. "Saved us the trouble of hunting you down." "Let him go, Delaney," Zachary said evenly. "It's over. Fletcher's been captured. There's no money coming your way." Delaney laughed. "You think we're doing this for money? Fletcher and us go way back. This is about loyalty, and making sure you and your pretty wife understand what happens to people who cross Douglas Fletcher." "Father, are you all right?" Rose called from the doorway, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'm fine, Rose," James answered, though the cut on his forehead and the bruise darkening his jaw suggested otherwise. "Don't worry about me." Delaney moved sideways, keeping the knife trained on Zachary while trying to position himself to see Rose as well. It was the opening Zachary had been waiting for. He lunged forward, grabbing Delaney's wrist and forcing the knife upward. The two men grappled, crashing into the wall and then onto a small table that collapsed beneath their weight. Rose rushed to her father, quickly working to untie the ropes binding him to the chair. "We need to get out of here," she said urgently as the ropes fell away. "Carson is downstairs. If he hears the commotion—" As if on cue, heavy footsteps pounded down the corridor outside. James, now free, staggered to his feet. "We need a weapon," he muttered, looking around the room. On the floor, Zachary and Delaney continued to struggle for control of the knife. Delaney was smaller but wiry and strong, and he fought with the desperation of a man who knew he had nothing to lose. Rose spotted a heavy brass paperweight on a shelf and grabbed it, but before she could use it, Carson appeared in the doorway, a revolver in his hand. "Nobody move!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the sounds of the fight. Zachary and Delaney froze, still tangled together on the floor. Carson's eyes darted between them, then to Rose and her father. "Should have minded your own business, Alden," Carson growled, raising the revolver. "Fletcher was right about you, too noble for your own good." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Carson aimed at Zachary, his finger tightening on the trigger. James Allerton, moving with unexpected speed for a man his age, threw himself at Carson just as the gun went off. The bullet went wide, embedding itself in the ceiling, as both men crashed to the floor. In that moment of distraction, Zachary wrenched the knife from Delaney's grip and brought the hilt down hard on the side of his head. Delaney went limp, unconscious. Carson and James were still struggling for the gun. Rose raised the paperweight, looking for an opening to strike without hitting her father. Before she could act, a second shot rang out. Both men went still. "Father!" Rose cried, dropping to her knees beside them. For a terrible moment, she couldn't tell who had been hit. Then Carson rolled to the side, revealing the spreading red stain on his own shirt. The gun lay between them, smoking slightly. "I'm all right," James gasped, sitting up shakily. He pulled the trigger, but the gun turned at the last moment. Footsteps and shouts from outside indicated that the shots had been heard by others on the boat. Zachary helped James to his feet while Rose retrieved the revolver, keeping it trained on Delaney, who was beginning to stir. "We need to get off this boat," Zachary said urgently. "Those shots will bring security, and I doubt they'll be interested in hearing our side of the story." They made their way quickly back down the service corridor, avoiding the main salon, where passengers were now gathered in confused clusters, trying to determine the source of the gunshots. Their pilot was still waiting at the launch, visibly relieved when they appeared. "Heard shots," he said as he helped them aboard. "Thought you might be in trouble." "We need to get back to Sacramento as quickly as possible," Zachary told him, "and contact the authorities." As the launch pulled away from the River Queen, Rose held her father close, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I thought we'd lost you," she whispered. James patted her hand, his own eyes suspiciously moist. "Takes more than a couple of Fletcher's thugs to get rid of me." He looked at Zachary with new respect. "You came for me. Both of you risked your lives." "You're family," Zachary said simply. "We take care of our own." By the time they reached Sacramento, dawn was breaking over the city. They went directly to the sheriff's office, where they gave their statements about the events on the River Queen. A telegraph was sent to Grass Valley to inform Sheriff Wilson about Fletcher's accomplices, and deputies were dispatched to the riverboat to apprehend Delaney if he hadn't already fled, and to retrieve Carson's body. Exhausted but relieved, they finally returned to the Golden Eagle Hotel. James, despite his protests that he was perfectly fine, was examined by a doctor who declared him bruised but not seriously injured. "You should rest today," Rose told her father as they settled him into his room. "We can delay our departure for Portland by a day." James shook his head firmly. "Nonsense. I've had worse injuries breaking in new horses. The steamer leaves at noon, and we'll be on it." Rose and Zachary exchanged glances, knowing better than to argue with the stubborn set of James's jaw. "At least sleep for a few hours," Zachary suggested. "We'll wake you in time to make the boat." As they left James to rest, Zachary put his arm around Rose's waist, drawing her close. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. Rose nodded, leaning into his embrace. "I just want to leave all this behind us. Start our new life without looking back." "We will," Zachary promised. "By this time tomorrow, we'll be on our way to Oregon. Fletcher and his men will be behind bars, and all of this will be just a bad memory." But, as they both knew too well, memories weren't so easily left behind. The steamer to Portland departed precisely at noon, its whistle echoing across the Sacramento waterfront. As it began its journey northward, Rose, Zachary, and James stood at the rail, watching the city recede into the distance. "Hard to believe we're finally on our way," Rose said, the breeze from the river cooling her face. "After everything that's happened." James nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the most difficult journeys lead to the best destinations." He glanced at Zachary, who stood on Rose's other side. "I was wrong about you, son. I thought you were cut from the same cloth as your father. I see now that a man makes his own way, regardless of where he comes from." Zachary extended his hand, and James shook it firmly. "Thank you, sir. That means a great deal, coming from you." As the steamer made its way up the river toward the bay and the open Pacific beyond, Rose felt a sense of peace settling over her. The events of the past month, Zachary's arrest, Fletcher's treachery, their narrow escapes, seemed to fade in importance as she looked toward the future. Their journey to Oregon was uneventful, a welcome change after the drama that had preceded it. They arrived in Portland on a misty morning in late August, then took the stagecoach to their final destination, the small but growing town of Newburgh in the heart of the Willamette Valley. The land Zachary had purchased sight unseen exceeded their expectations. 200 acres of fertile soil bordered by a clear stream, with a view of rolling hills that turned blue in the distance. The previous owner had built a small but solid cabin that would serve them well until they could construct a proper house. James, who had used the proceeds from the sale of his mercantile to purchase a storefront in Newburgh's modest business district, threw himself into establishing a new general store with an enthusiasm that belied his age. Within weeks, Allerton's general merchandise had become a gathering place for the community, just as it had been in Grass Valley. For Rose and Zachary, those first months in Oregon were a time of hard work and simple joys. They planted their first crops, bought cattle and horses for the ranch, and began to make friends among their neighbors. Raphael arrived as promised, with his wife and children, and settled on a parcel of land adjoining theirs. As winter approached, bringing with it the Pacific Northwest's characteristic rain, they worked to make the cabin more comfortable, adding a proper stone fireplace, reinforcing the roof, and furnishing it with pieces Rose had brought from California and new items crafted by the local carpenter. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside and a fire crackling in the hearth, Zachary presented Rose with a small, wrapped package. "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Alden," he said, his eyes warm with love as he handed it to her. Rose carefully unwrapped the paper to reveal a small leather-bound journal. Opening it, she found the pages blank except for an inscription on the first page, written in Zachary's neat hand. "For Rose, to record our new beginning. May each page be filled with happiness and peace. With all my love, Zachary." Tears filled her eyes as she looked up at him. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." "There's something else," Zachary said, a hint of nervousness in his voice now. "Something I've been meaning to tell you." Rose set the journal aside, noting the serious expression that had come over his face. "What is it?" "I've been corresponding with Judge Blackwell," Zachary explained. "He's been keeping me informed about Fletcher's case." Rose tensed. The mention of Fletcher's name still had the power to make her blood run cold. And Fletcher's trial was last month in Sacramento. He was found guilty on all counts Thornton's murder, the false accusations against me, the kidnapping of your father, and the conspiracy with Carson and Delaney. What was the sentence? Rose asked, though she already knew what it would be for such crimes. Hanging, Zachary confirmed. It was carried out 3 days ago. Rose was silent for a long moment, absorbing this news. She had no love for Douglas Fletcher. He had nearly destroyed everything she held dear, but she took no joy in his death either. "It's over then," she said finally. "Truly over." Zachary nodded, taking her hands in his. "That's what I wanted to tell you. We can look forward now, without any shadows from the past." Rose leaned forward to kiss him, feeling the last weight of fear lift from her heart. "Forward," she agreed. "Together." Spring came early to the Willamette Valley, bringing with it new growth and renewed energy. The ranch was thriving under Zachary's careful management, and Rose had become an integral part of the Newburgh community, teaching at the small schoolhouse 2 days a week, and helping her father with the store on others. One evening in April, as they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and pink, Rose shared her own news. "I visited Dr. Matthews today," she said, her voice casual though her heart was racing. "He confirmed what I've suspected for a few weeks now." Zachary turned to her, his expression curious. "Oh, and what's that?" "We're going to have a baby," Rose said, unable to keep the smile from spreading across her face. "In late October, he thinks." The joy that bloomed on Zachary's face was everything Rose had hoped for. He gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "A baby," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Our own family." "The first of many, I hope," Rose said, resting her head against his chest. "A house full of children, just like we talked about." "I love you, Rose Alden," Zachary said, kissing the top of her head. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," Rose replied, "through every storm and sunshine." As the light faded from the sky, revealing the first stars of evening, Rose thought about the journey that had brought them here, the false accusation, the desperate search for evidence, the tearful reunion at the train station when she'd thought she might lose him forever. Every step, even the painful ones, had led them to this moment of perfect contentment. Their son, James Zachary Alden, was born on a crisp autumn day, as the leaves were turning from green to gold. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes, and from the moment he entered the world, he was surrounded by love. James Allerton, now a proud grandfather, closed the store for an entire week to help with the new arrival, his gruff exterior melting completely in the presence of his grandson. "Sturdiest baby I've ever seen," he declared, cradling the infant with surprising gentleness. "Got the Allerton chin and the Alden spirit. He'll be a force to reckon with." The years that followed brought the prosperity and happiness that Rose and Zachary had dreamed of during those dark days in Grass Valley. Their ranch grew to be one of the most successful in the valley, known for its quality horses and cattle. Rose's father's store became a cornerstone of the community, expanding twice to accommodate the growing population of Newburgh. Little James was joined by a sister, Emma, 2 years later, and then by another brother, William, the following year. The cabin gave way to a spacious farmhouse with a wraparound porch, just as Rose had envisioned. Raphael and his family flourished on their adjoining land, and the two families remained as close as if they were blood relations. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Zachary surprised Rose with a trip back to California, not to Grass Valley, which held too many difficult memories, but to San Francisco, where they stayed in the Grand Palace Hotel and attended the opera and dined in fine restaurants. It was during this trip that Rose, now in her early 30s and more beautiful than ever in Zachary's eyes, told him she was expecting their 4th child. Their daughter Catherine was born the following spring, completing their family. As the children grew, they filled the ranch with laughter and energy. James, serious and responsible like his father. Emma, fierce and independent with her mother's compassion. William, a dreamer with a gift for working with animals. And Catherine, the peacemaker who could charm anyone with her smile. Life wasn't always easy. There were difficult seasons when crops failed or prices fell, illnesses that brought worry, and the normal challenges of raising 4 spirited children. But through it all, Rose and Zachary faced each day together, their bond strengthened by the trials they had overcome and the life they had built. When James Allerton passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 72, the entire town of Newburgh turned out for his funeral, a testament to the respect he had earned in his adopted community. Rose grieved deeply for her father, but found comfort in the legacy he had left, and in the family that surrounded her with love. As their children grew into adults, James taking over much of the ranch management, Emma teaching at the local school, William starting his own horse breeding operation, and Catherine showing a talent for business that led her to take over her grandfather's store, Rose and Zachary found new joy in watching the next generation forge their own paths. On a warm summer evening nearly 30 years after they had first arrived in Oregon, Rose sat with Zachary on the porch of their home, just as they had done countless times before. Her hair was streaked with silver now, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, but when he looked at her, he still saw the brave young woman who had risked everything to save him. "Do you ever think about how differently our lives might have turned out?" Rose asked, her hand resting comfortably in his. "If Fletcher hadn't framed you, if we had never left Grass Valley." Zachary considered this, watching the fireflies begin to emerge in the gathering dusk. "I believe we would have found our way to happiness somehow," he said finally. "But I'm grateful for the path we took, difficult as it was at times. It brought us here, to this life we've built together." Rose nodded, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I was so afraid that day at the train station," she admitted, "when I thought I might lose you." "But you didn't," Zachary reminded her gently. "You never will." As the stars appeared one by one above them, Rose thought about the journal Zachary had given her that first Christmas in Oregon, now filled with 30 years of memories, both ordinary and extraordinary. She had recorded it all: the births of their children, the growth of their ranch, the small daily joys and occasional sorrows that made up a life well lived. "No regrets?" Zachary asked softly, echoing the question he had asked her on the train leaving Grass Valley all those years ago. Rose smiled, turning to him with the same certainty she had felt then. None at all. And in the gathering twilight of that summer evening, surrounded by the home and family they had created together, Rose knew that their story, which had begun with a false accusation and tears at a train station, had become something beautiful and enduring, a testament to love's power to overcome injustice, to heal wounds, and to build a future brighter than either of them could have imagined.